So this video will be like an epilogue, probably the last 3 days of the ride. I didn't really shoot that much video. The goal for today was to ride to Figueres to see the Salvador Dali Museum and then ride back. And I want to say it was probably about 10 kilometers. I'm not exactly sure how far it was. Got up, had my country breakfast. This is the side of the building, I believe. I think that's the front to the right. And then I walked my bike around and washed it down the night before from the mud. I had fresh eggs this morning from the chickens. This is the back of the hotel before I start my ride. And as you can see, there's a lot of gravel. It was pretty much almost exclusively a gravel ride into Figueres. This is where I'm leaving from. It's not really the best view. It's more around the back there. But looks like a great day. This road is this type of road that's really bumpy on my bike. There's all these rocks or pebbles embedded into the ground. Really bumpy ride, especially with a load. Doesn't look that bad, but it's really kind of a challenge to ride on, or not a challenge, but a unfun experience after a little while. So when I arrived in Figueres, one thing about the Salvador Dali Museum is you have to, when you buy your ticket, you have to book your entrance time because it's very crowded, at least when I went. You know, if I got there at noon, my entrance time was probably like 12:45 to 1 o'clock, and I just decided to walk around the town a little bit. That guy there looks like he's part of a Salvador Dali movie. There in the overcoat and the fedora. And then when I got to the museum, one thing I will tell you is I went in early April and there were so many people there. A lot of them were school kids, you know, junior high and high school, but it was incredibly crowded. This picture right here is just the town square. I didn't eat anything, but there were some cafes down there, and this other pictures of the town square looking the other way. And that wasn't very crowded at all, again, because I think I'm slightly off season. And then when I decided to go in the museum, I had to figure out what to do with my bike, and I couldn't find a bike rack, so I ended up talking to security guard. I was like, oh, do you have anywhere to park my bike? And she said, no, but if you leave it over there, I'll keep an eye on it. So I was like, okay. I ended up locking it to that post right there, and that was the extent of where you could put your bike at the museum. And this picture here is out front. It doesn't really represent the amount of crowds, but it was really crowded. And one thing I will say, that it was almost, it felt almost like a safety hazard, because when I went inside, there was one room in particular, it might have been the jewelry room. There was like one door in and one door out, like the same door in and out. And it was just something that, and there was like 80 people in that room, and it just was like sardines. And I thought, man, if something goes wrong, this is not a good situation, unless there was a door there I didn't see. But it looked like something that was definitely a fire hazard. And this is the atrium of the museum. I didn't really shoot that much video while I was at the museum. I took a fair amount of stills, but video I didn't really shoot that much. So this is a drone shot I took when I got back to my accommodations. That out there, that little town there is Villa Mala, and that's where the train station was if you wanted to take the train into Figueres. And the road there on the left side of frame is the road that I came back on. I do want to mention that I changed my routing on the way home with Google Maps and decided to take a slightly longer route, but it would keep me on the road and avoid all kinds of gravel. So that was something that I wanted to do, because I was kind of over the gravel at that point. As I pan the camera around here, you'll see the town that I stayed in. You can actually maybe make out the little church steeple. That was the center point of the town. At that point, I went back to the hotel and started to pack and get ready for the next night, as my ritual would be to like prep the route for the next day, pack things up, and then the next morning pack anything else that was remaining that needed to be packed, because things, you know, you can't pack everything the night before. You'd have to like wrap your toiletries, finish charging everything for the next day. As I was saying, I didn't shoot much video the next couple days, and today was no exception. I didn't really shoot any video till I got up to the peak, or the highest point of my journey. One thing I wanted to let you know, that the wind was horrendous that day. Luckily, this part was all flat after I left my bed and breakfast in Siurana, and I rode this, and it must have been like 20 miles an hour, the wind. And I was hoping, I went this way because I was hoping that when I went through the national park here, that I would get some kind of tree, you know, something to help with the wind, but it was pretty wide open and I still got pummeled by the wind. Now, this route I had found on Crazy Guy with a Bike, there was a couple that rode this, and I basically just followed their route. I think one of the other ways to go, if you wanted to stay on, you know, a traditional route, was maybe to go this way and then take the N260 up that way. I think that's the way Google wanted to put me. Google didn't really tell me to go this way. So once I got up here to Villa Giulia, or something like that, is where I started to go through the mountains. And as you can see, this is where I really started to climb. One of the reasons I took this road was to go to this monastery up here, the village, or the old village of Ermarta di Santa Cruz de Roads. And what that is basically a very early village that either predates the monastery or was built up along with the monastery. I don't think you can hear me, but I'm just about to head up to the monastery. I'm hoping that I'm at the top. I'm going up that way. With this headwind, it's been ridiculous. It took a lot out of me on the flat, level land, and then I had to do this climb. After that, it was quite easy to make it up to the remnants of the village that predates the monastery. There were a lot of people with trekking poles, hikers I guess you would call them in the States, but they had trekking poles, and I was hearing more French than Spanish at this point. Out there in the distance is the other monastery. I'm gonna go see. It's between the trees. Yeah, there were a lot of trekkers in this area because there's all kinds of trekking paths, and there were signs for trekking paths and loops and stuff like that, day hikes and such. And as I pan the camera around here, you'll see remnants of the village, the walls that are left. And then I went down, got my bike, and rode up to the monastery. Ride to there, I think, is Lenka, where I'm going. I think I'm going to drop down here. I think I'm on the downhill now, which is fabulous. And that might be where I'm going tomorrow. That is called El Porto de la Selva. Because I'm looking at this map here and I don't see Casque, where Salvador Dali house is, but it might be very close to that town there. There's the monastery right there. Here I am inside the monastery. Could just give you a pan of the main hall. As you can see, it's been reconstructed. This stuff that's the tanner type of rock is the part that's been reconstructed. There on the arches, you can see it specifically in that arch in front. You can see where they've restored it. It is a multi-level monastery, since it was at the top of the mountain, but there was multiple levels that you could visit, different descriptions for the different time periods. There is a cafeteria there. Well, it looked like the cafeteria was open. It was quite empty. Here I am at the monastery up here, and as you can see, it's at the top of the elevation. Here's the village here. And then here is I think the monastery. That's a picture from the village of the monastery, but here's the service road. Here's where I took the previous video, and I took that road up there. I did the service road. I stopped here at the village, and then I went on to the monastery, and then from there I went downhill. Again, the wind was such a challenge that I remember I had to stop a couple times because I was fearing that I would get blown off the road. I must have been going like maybe 3-4 miles an hour down these switchbacks because it was just so sketchy with the wind. The wind is unbelievable. Coming down this hill from the monastery, it was just horrendous in terms of trying to control the bike, not get blown off course. But I still have to go way to the other side over there. So then when I came down to get to my apartment, took this little beach road, which I wouldn't recommend because it was kind of, it was like wooden planks. It was, a wood pathway, but there were steps, and I remember I had to walk my bike up, and then there's a little park area here, and then I eventually just got on this GR92, which was a shoulderless winding road, which is basically the main road connecting the two towns. It was a little sketchy, a lot of blind curves here, but the drivers were pretty courteous. And again, it was off season. It might be more of a challenge during the busy season. One thing I want to mention, with a couple of places I stayed, even though I booked them through a hotel site, they were more or less apartments that were vacant. And a couple of them, the one in Olot and this one that I stayed here, were pretty much brand new or just recently refurbished. Now, when I booked the site, I would get an email saying, please contact us 24 hours before you arrive so we can work out how to get the key. And in this situation, I was supposed to call the gentleman that I was going to meet. I forgot about that, so I called him like a couple hours before I got there, and he didn't speak very much English, and I didn't speak very much Spanish. So what happened was he suggested WhatsApp, so I downloaded WhatsApp, and we were able to communicate that way. And he eventually met me up at the top here. I'll put in a couple pictures of the view from my apartment, but you could see it was quite a climb to get up here. I would definitely recommend downloading the application WhatsApp and creating an account because it's international. That night I went down here, and I think there's a supermarket somewhere in this area. The supermarket was relatively close. Actually, the supermarket was probably here, because one other thing I did that night was after I got into my apartment and I unloaded, I wanted to find the train station, which is right here. And so I rode my bike down there, found the supermarket, found the train station because I had to leave on Saturday. This, I believe, is Thursday night. One reason I didn't go to Rose's, which I think may have been a better idea in terms of it being a nicer area, because obviously it's not that much of a, it doesn't look like it's difficult to go to. I could have just come down here and gone to Rose's. The issue was I wanted to catch a train on that Saturday morning. You can see there's a train station here, and that was my ability to take the train back to Barcelona. So here we are. I apologize for this having to be mostly a map video, but hopefully you get some information out of it. But this was Friday, April 12th, 2019, and I had scheduled a day trip to Cadaqués. I'm going to stop saying it, the Salvador Dali house over here. Something to mention is you have to pre-buy your tickets for the Salvador Dali house at least a day in advance. I ended up buying mine a couple days in advance. You have to pick a time, and then you schedule it and you go. So I rode my bike from my apartment, this was, as you can see, all downhill, back onto the GR92, and I didn't stop in town. I stopped in town on the way back to get some lunch or to get some light dinner. I started to climb right about here. There were groups of cyclists, and cyclists by themselves, all passing me, of course. I think most of the cyclists turned off on this road here, which I believe is the 614. I took the 613 and I continued on to the GI 614 down to town. This section here, I didn't see any cyclists pretty much at all. A lot of tour buses and cars and stuff. And again, the wind was kind of not great. It was kind of a challenge riding the bike going downhill. I had to go really slow. But once I got to town, I got there kind of early. What I did is I ended up getting a coffee at the beach here. There's a little cafe right here with a couple cafes. I just had a cappuccino and sat by the beach and waited till my time, because I think my time was like 11:30 at the house. And then I took my bike along here, went to the house. This is Dali's house. I guess where he lived in his later years. About to do the tour. Very hilly here and incredibly windy. You can probably hear. And then after that, I headed to back. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to try and not take this same road back, because it was kind of a lot of cars on it, no shoulder and stuff. Although they were real courteous, I thought I'd try a different way. But I look on Google Maps, and Google gave me the option of going this way. But what I realized when I got there, and something I can't stress enough, is if you can do street view, you should really check out and see what the road looks like, because sometimes Google will put you on a gravel road or a mountain bike trail or a hiking trail. I seem to remember Bike Touring Mike, when he did his trip, that this trip is kind of modeled on. He had the same thing happen to him, where Google wanted him to take basically a mountain road, and he couldn't take it. He had to turn around and go back. Well, I went down here, and let's see if you look at the satellite. Oh yeah, remember this parking lot. This was an elevated parking lot. You can see me. I think I stopped at a supermarket here. I got some water, and then I was trying to figure out my way to get down to here. And I was having trouble because this is all it's like one way, and it was elevated parking structure. And I finally got down there, and I looked, and it was like, I think there was a gate there, And it was just like, oh, I'm not going to go up that. It just looks like it's a challenge. But now that I look at it, it looks like it was pretty reasonable, actually. It's just a gravel road. Probably would have been doable, but I didn't know what I was getting into. I think I was kind of intimidated by the incline. That was probably what it was the way it started. So anyway, I had to go back, and it actually wasn't bad. There wasn't any cars. I think everyone was going into town. It was fine going back. I don't think I had maybe 1 or 2 cars behind me. So then when I got back into town, I ended up going over here again. This El Port de la Silva was kind of closed for the season, and so I stopped here and I had I forget what I had, a hamburger or something. I think it was a hot dog actually. And then from there I went back to my apartment, packed up, and then I went to the train station to buy my ticket for the next day to catch my train back to Barcelona Saturday morning. And that was pretty much the end of my tour. I didn't really ride my bike in Barcelona. I just stopped at the Orbea store and got a box, which was so cool of them to give me a box, because I went to one of the bike rental places and they wanted to charge me like 20 euros, I think, for it. And Orbea was like, no problem, you can have a box. So on the way back to my hotel, I stopped and got a box to pack up my bike, and I started packing my bike when I got there the next day on Saturday. And thanks for watching, and hopefully this was helpful in some form. And thank you.